going to be, you're doing The Adventures of Spike and Johnny. Is that what you're reading from tonight?
That's right.
And other ones? And maybe you can tell us a little about yourself.
I don't care.
Keith, thanks so much for coming. It's great to have you.
Are you Janene?
I'm Janene. Nice to meet you.
Pleased to meet you. Okay.
Hey,
Dance.
Exactly.
A bit confused.
I think I'll.
Laying your weight there.
No,
Oh, I took your chair.
No, that's fine. I don't own it.
You don't? I was going to sell it to you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, my name's Gary Pryke, and if I appear nervous, it's because I am. And I don't know if necessarily The Adventures of Spike and Johnny is going to make any impact on the State of the Union down south.
Yeah, I know.
I was listening to little snippets of the debate on my way out here. But I think, there's an intention behind the book, and I think it can have an impact on young people, particularly boys, I'd say between the age of 9 and 13. Little tiny bit of background on the story is where the idea came from is it goes way back to 1988. That's when I wrote the first draft, and then the story sat in a filing cabinet for 20 years, and I can talk later after the break about how that all sort of developed. But at the time I was newly married, and we were living in a house, renting the main floor of a house in Kitsilano, and at the house the bicycles were all kept in a shed at the side of the house. And one morning I went out to grab my bike and go for a ride, and I noticed a spider had spun its web in the front spokes of the bike, and I thought, there's a story in this somewhere. and then it went from there, and that's how it all sort of transpires in the story. We've got Johnny Upanishad. He's a 12-year-old red-headed boy, and Spike is his spider accomplice. And I wanted to write a simple, a fun read and a simple adventure story. It's basically a rescue story. Spike and Johnny rescue a 13-year-old girl who has been kidnapped by the mob, and it ends up happily ever after. So if you thumb through it, you'll notice that there's an illustration. There's 9 chapters and an epilogue, and there's one black and white illustration for each chapter. And if you open the book up like this, front and back cover, they make one complete scene, and you'll notice that it's Spanish Banks and City of Vancouver in the background, and we've got virtually most of the characters are there. We've got our mob of comic and not so comic villains, and Johnny with his famous mountain bike, and Spike along with him. And that's where the story begins, is Spanish Banks. So I think what I'll do is I'll just read some snippets for you, and so you can get a sense of the tone of the story. And I wanted to do a few things, and that was sort of create a kind of a timeless quality to the book. When I picked it up 20 years later, the world had changed, and I had to confront the whole fact of technology and whether I wanted to bring in the whole world of computers and cell phones and high tech and all that. And I decided I didn't want to do that, and I wanted to keep it low tech, and I would say probably the most advanced piece of technology in the story is a cordless telephone. if you wanted to date the story and give it a period sense, then it would have to be somewhere around the mid 80s, because Science World plays a prominent role in the story, and I think it was built somewhere around 1984, something like that. I wanted it to have that sort of timeless quality, and again, a fun, simple kind of story, and a deliberately, I would say, a high-level vocabulary. I should mention that at the time when I wrote the first draft, I was happily married. I was teaching high school drama at Van Tech High School in Vancouver, and I have to say I'm now retired from teaching, and I've had a very satisfying 30 years in the classroom teaching English and ESL and math and drama. And what I tried to do is I wanted to deliberately infuse the story with some fairly high-level vocabulary. I wanted to, on one level, reach the young audience, but at the same time entertain an adult audience at the same time. So that was part of what I was up to. And what I see for the book at this point in time is, if I look at that age range from 9 to 13, boys and girls, especially boys, I like the idea, of reaching out to boys that have maybe kind of given up on reading. Maybe they're only looking at comic books or graphic novels, that kind of thing. And I see this as, as you can see, this sort of like comic book style, but I see it as a bridge that could possibly encourage young readers, especially young boys, teenage boys, to pick up a dictionary and expand their vocabulary, and perhaps move further into more mature kind of fiction and enjoy that. I take a look these days with, and I have to admit, I'm guilty myself of hardly reading at all these days. I'm always on the computer. If I am reading, it's usually something on the internet. So I think there's an opportunity, hopefully, to encourage that. So I'll read a few excerpts for you.